All right. Good morning, or rather, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Horizons by Hopkins panel Beyond the Books, Cultivating Passions Outside of My Scholarship. My name is Gregory Smaldone, and I am a postdoctoral fellow in the Teaching Academy here at JHU. I'm very excited to introduce our three wonderful panelists today who are all exceptional scholars and have fascinating and impactful passion projects outside of their research. Dr. Christine Liu is a postdoctoral scholar at UCSF, investigating the effects of psilocybin on neural circuits and behavior. Her passion for art, science communication, and public engagement led her to form Two Photon Art, where she creates designs and jewelry inspired by science. She also works as a tattoo artist on the weekends. Dr. Chris Matthews is the chair of the anthropology department at Montclair State University. He studies the archaeology and history of marginalized and racialized communities in North America. He's currently working on projects focused on African American and Native American communities. And Dr. Nika Denny is assistant professor of history at Washington and Lee University and co-founder and president of the Black Women's Studies Association. Her research examines Black feminism and Black intellectual thought. So I'm going to get us started with a light question for all three of our panelists. So if you all want to just take a minute or two to answer this, I just thought I'd start with something light and quick. If you could go back in time and pick an entirely different career path, what would it have been? Not saying you have regrets about becoming academics, right? But what would your ideal alternative universe be? Nika, you want to get it started?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coordinating today. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you. In an alternate universe, I think that, well, my perfect alternate universe would be one where there are not pressing social issues that I feel compelled to address through my labor. Um, and instead be able to do something that I enjoy more than teaching, which I of course do enjoy quite a bit. But I would probably be a travel blogger or a travel influencer or something like that. If I knew that social media and Instagram would grow into what it is today, I probably could have found a way to monetize that and get my vacations paid for, and be able to just take pictures and write about where I'm going and have a good time.
Oh, that's the dream. Oh, perfect answer. Christine, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I feel like I already do whatever it is I want to do in this current life path and universe. But if I was thinking about it, a lot of my work based in research is about problem solving. So in this alternate universe, I would like to create problems. I would like to perhaps be like a mystery novel writer or something like that. And just actually, instead of traveling, just have a house like on a cliff and smoke like a tobacco pipe and just write all these stories about all these problems happening that need to be solved that I won't solve.
I love that. Thank you. And Chris, you want to close it out?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on the panel. My alternative path was almost my real path, I guess, because I was a musician. I played in bands when I was a kid and as a young adult and considered doing it for real. And then sort of saw the landscape and was like, yeah, I don't think that's really going to work. So I would have stayed with it if I could have my things with it, especially now that I'm playing again. And I'm feeling like, I could have done that. I don't know. No regrets though, like you said in the question. I'm very happy where I ended up. The overlap is pretty clear.
All right. Thank you to our one audience member who posted their own alternative dream career path. And just a reminder, we will have a Q&A at the end. And so if anyone has any questions for the panelists, please post it in the chat and I will get to them as the session is closing. So the next question revolves around side hustle versus passion project. And this one goes out to Nika and Christine. So Nika, you published a post with The Professor Is In entitled Always Have a Side Hustle and Other Lessons I Learned from Academia. It's a two-part post. Check it out, people. It's really cool. In which you discuss the myriad professional benefits of gaining experience in different jobs while pursuing a PhD. And Christine, your work as a tattoo artist and founding Two Photon Art could certainly fall under the category of a side hustle, but seems at first glance as more of a passion project, like your research playing out in a more in a field you're more passionate about. I want to ask if you two could discuss the difference between pursuing side hustles as a way to pay the bills and build your resume, and developing a passion project that's an emotional investment in pursuits other than your core academic research. In what ways are these two sides of the same coin? In what ways are they different enterprises? Christine, can you get us started by giving us a little background on how you formed Two Photon Art?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way you put it is spot on, that it, now many years in, I started in 2015. So what, that's like 8 years later. It now looks like a great side hustle, but it really started as a passion project. It was the second year of graduate school, and it actually really started as a way for me to stay in touch with one of my very good friends that I met doing science. And we were both quite artistic and living in different cities, starting to transition into full-time jobs and graduate school. And we just wanted to make a commitment to each other to find a way to keep making art. And we found places and events that would force us to meet deadlines, to make art with each other, to share with the community, and started getting a bunch of amazing feedback from the community. In particular, we went to a lot of zine fests. It's a very vibrant community of people who are publishing their own stories, photographs, information. There's no filter at all, and it's a very kind of underground punk community, very counterculture oriented. And it's a place where people can be their true full selves. And it was such an amazing place to be and to share art that gave me the chance to really be who I wanted to be. And I, in this post that Nika Denny wrote, like, it's amazing. I love these two sentences. It says, side hustles can serve a variety of purposes. They force you to be honest with yourself about who you are when you strip away the awards and publications. And, it goes on so many other gems, but I think that having that really gave me a chance to know myself better, outside of the external pressures of all these things that I'm doing for external validation. But what is it that really gives me fulfillment, that really drives me outside of everything that I might be defined by in my main career, so to speak? So yeah, this is an amazing, nuanced topic to discuss.
Thanks for that, Christine. I want to start by saying that in some ways, I think that my perspectives on side hustles have evolved somewhat from the time when I wrote this about 5 years ago. And there are a couple caveats that I would like to pull out. The first is that we need, quote unquote, need side hustles because of capitalism, and because of the ways that graduate students in particular are not paid adequately for their labor. And so with me thinking about side hustles, that was really a byproduct of me figuring out, how do I get money to do the kinds of things that I like to do? And also, what are the things that I could get paid to do, just in case this whole academia thing doesn't work out? I don't want to bring the energy of the job market in here, but it nevertheless is part of what was inspiring me thinking about side hustles, in terms of, how can I make more money, and what are non-academic things that I can do in order to make more money? So that's the first part of the caveat that I want to mention. Another part of the caveat that I want to mention is that I think that capitalism urges us to monetize everything, and to monetize hobbies, when sometimes, like, we really can just enjoy hobbies for the sake of leisure and for the sake of enjoying ourselves. So with those caveats out of the way, I do think that it's important to differentiate between what purpose your side hustle is serving, whether it falls into the first category of being one out of economic necessity, whether it falls into the second category of being a hobby you have that you could monetize, or something that you enjoy, or something that really should not be monetized at all, and that can and should be kept for yourself, for your own personal fulfillment. So I'll leave it at that, because I do want us to be able to explore some more of this in the Q&A and in conversation with the other panelists. But the long and short of it is that side hustles are sometimes an economic necessity, but we don't need to monetize everything.
I love that. And that's actually a perfect transition over to you, Chris. So, we've been talking about passions related to your research, but this is also a panel about passions outside of your research. In grad school, it's supposed to be all about the dissertation, and everything in your life gets prioritized around that. So Chris, can you talk about your relationship to music and how you make space for that in your life when it's this, this passion that just doesn't connect at all, that doesn't have any ancillary professional. I mean, obviously you could go be a musician, right? You've always got that in your back pocket.
I guess so, yeah. I actually no, I don't think so. What I learned is that it's great to be a musician. I play guitar. I have my roots in punk rock. So Christine, I appreciated your zine fest story, and I agree with everything you described in terms of the way that sort of gets expressed and how it feels. But so I was, I stopped playing music because I saw what talent was. And it's like, when someone has talent, it's insane. You could see them work, and that's not to take away from anyone who loves music, wants to play music, make music for themselves, make music for others. But there's a stratosphere of talented people that I started seeing around me, and it's like, okay, that's not me, but I love playing it, and so I kept all my instruments. And moved around with them as I had jobs in Louisiana, California, New York, and now I'm in New Jersey. And then I just got actually really lucky to end up where I am because the town I live in, which happens to be Montclair, where my university is also a kind of destination suburb for creative types who work in the city. And it just so happens that there was somebody putting together like a bunch of people who play music who are also parents, which is another complicated factor in terms of trying to have a passion that's not just taking care of your kids. And I met someone there who recognized me, and you could see my name, Chris Matthews. There could be a million of us. And he just came up and asked me, "Are you the Chris Matthews from this band Shudder to Think?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am." And he was like, "I totally know who you are, and you are great and all that." And he was a drummer, and he actually played in another permutation of that band after I left. And now I have a new band with new musicians, and we record. And I very much agree that I could try to monetize it, but I feel privileged and really fortunate that I don't have to monetize it. It would be great to monetize it because it's not free. Recording costs a lot of money, but I'm in a position where I can afford that now, luckily. And I don't know. It's having both in my life is great. And I would just say one more thing. I think the way you all found me was there was an article that my university newspaper did on a bunch of professors who are also musicians. And I think it's not that uncommon for this kind of work, whether it's music or other forms of creative expression, to have space in academic life. I think mostly because of our flexible schedules, if we can have that. But, I understand not everyone is in that position. So I'll stop talking for now.
Wonderful. Thank you. This next question is going to go out to Chris and Nika. So, Nika, you've written a number of articles in newspapers, news journals that touch on issues related to, but fundamentally beyond your own scholarship. And Chris, you've been cited in a number of similar publications. The line between journalism and history can be thin at times. And for those non-historians in the room, there was even a panel discussion at the American Historical Association conference trying to decide where precisely that line is. I wanted to ask both of you how you operate differently as scholars and as public scholars. Are your public engagements simply your scholarship in bite-sized form, or do you have different authorial identities when writing monographs versus new articles, or in your case, Chris, speaking for them? How do the stakes of your research change, and how do you form arguments differently? Nika, can you get us started off, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't recall exactly which one of my pieces was the first public piece that I wrote that was more leaning towards public scholarship than something academic, if we exclude these blog posts. I'm tempted to say that it may have been one where I'm talking about Juneteenth and how Juneteenth became a federal holiday. I arrived at this piece not because of my research, but because I was making jokes on Twitter. And because I created a meme. If y'all are familiar with the format where there's a guy with a butterfly and he's asking, "Is this X, Y, and Z?" It was in that style. And I'll see if I can find a link for it after I'm done talking and share it in the chat. But I was really frustrated with the fact that there were several attempts to ban so-called critical race theory, for instance. There were several attempts to neglect the severity of police brutality in this country. And the solution that our politicians landed on was, here, have a little holiday as a treat, right? When there are more serious ways to address problems of race and racism in this country. And so the article that I wrote was essentially arguing that making Juneteenth a federal holiday is not enough, and it is insufficient, and really just a consolation prize, even though Juneteenth is important for its cultural and historical significance. And so the way that I try to write publicly, I think, speaks more to some of the ways that I aim to merge my personal, political, and professional interests than how I might do so in an academic publication. I get to be snarkier when I'm writing for the public than I might be when I'm writing traditional academic historical pieces. And that's something I think grants me some freedom. I also, in theory, would like to be able to make more money from writing publicly or doing public lectures. And this is because, one, I do like money, but two, because my general approach to history is that we need to understand the past in order to contextualize the present and hopefully create a better future. I don't see history as being divorced from the contemporary moment. And something that I always tell my students is that even though my work focuses on 19th century African-American history, it's not because I'm fascinated by the 1800s in and of itself. It's because Black people have been saying the same thing for over 200 years. And so I think it's really important to be able to connect the dots between the past and the present. And that's something that I aim to do a bit more with some of my public work than some of my scholarly work.
That's great. Should I jump in, Gregory?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. I think I can echo everything that Nika says. She said it so well. My work isn't so much writing op-eds and that kind of thing in this arena. I think it's more giving talks. And I'm an archaeologist, and so I get the benefit of people thinking that archaeology is inherently interesting, yet they have no idea what it is. For real, which is a lot of fun to try and solve that problem. I don't have anything to do with dinosaurs, in case people are asking, but that's what most people think I do. But what I do is something that Nika's work in the 19th century would look familiar. I study 19th, 18th, early 20th century communities of color, and my job as a public speaker is to show that their interest in archaeology has some value politically for our agenda, if I can generalize, because they're interested in uncovering things. They're interested in wanting to know, how come I don't know this already? And that's one of the things that really works well that I know the talk went well, is when someone comes up to me after giving a talk saying, how did we not already know this? We know so much about the past. How do we not know those people were there? So for example, there's communities all around the New York area that are historic African-American and Native American communities, and they're marginalized intentionally. We could talk about that story, but mostly we just want to say they were there. And it goes back to, there was slavery in the North. And so we could talk about that. We could talk about enslavement happening in the town where I'm giving the talk. And people are always like, how come I don't know this? And that is a fabulous result, because if they have the desire to learn and the desire to see what they don't know, then a lot of it's right there at their fingertips. It's just been blocked from them because of the narratives that control what we think we should know about the past. So that's when I find it successful, and I do enjoy doing that. And it's a great way to make your work feel meaningful, because sometimes when you write a beautiful article, you just don't get that feeling back, right? Anyway, thanks.
All right, wonderful. Just a reminder, we're almost at the Q&A portion, and we have a few really good questions in the Whova chat, but if anyone wants to ask a question of any or all of our panelists, please feel free to post it right here in the Zoom chat. But this next question is going to go for you, Christine. So So you through Photon Art, you create zines or self-published booklets that capture the wonder in scientific topics. In that kind of venue, do you feel like your passion for the subject matter becomes something separate from the actual labor of producing scholarship? How does your relationship to your subject matter change when producing these kinds of for public consumption work?
That is a great question. And that was just a huge motivating factor for us to make these zines and make more, is that we would go and table, and it's, these communities of people who are generally pretty marginalized, a lot of people of color, a lot of people who have, neurodivergence, who are coming from, just all different kinds of backgrounds. And many of them felt also marginalized in their educational experience. They would pick up some of our zines. For example, we had one about face blindness, which is a phenomenon where, the part of the region that's responsible for recognizing faces or even just details in objects, like even the windows on a house, that region is impaired for whatever reason. It's called prosopagnosia, and people would pick this up and have aha moments, understanding how amazing the brain is, how amazing neural plasticity is, how they actually are interested in science, but just the ways that it was taught to them in school was not accessible or interesting to them. And we've heard so many times people, after spending, even 30 minutes reading every single one that we had, that if they had encountered our zines earlier on in their life, they could have definitely gone into science, because this spoke to them. We typically write with a lot of drawings. Sometimes they're abstract, but just the way the information is delivered, and it's all the same factual information that one might read in a review article or something like that, but we just package it in a way that feels very accessible and interesting and entertaining to folks. And I think that's why I like to say that we capture the wonder in science that can really spark people's interest and make them feel like it's for them. Because when I'm writing an article or something for my scientific community, they already have this curiosity. But what I'm trying to do is make the curiosity accessible to people who are perhaps turned science more inclusive too, because I really do think the more different kinds of thinkers and people and curiosity from different backgrounds would serve the field tremendously. But the way that science is taught in schools typically is very standardized and in one way, and it does not typically serve all these people. So I try to leverage my skills in art and communication to do my little small part in bringing a few more people in and making them feel like there's space for them too.
That's amazing. Thank you. All right, so we've got some really good questions going on in the chat, so we're going to move to them in just a second. But before we do, I just wanted to ask if each of you could share any final words of advice or any stories about your passion projects that you wanted to share. Just general words of wisdoms on how to develop healthy passions outside of your formal scholarship. So, Chris, do you want to get us started? You're muted, Chris.
Sorry.
That
I'm
happens.
fortunate enough to have played music, before I got into academics, and so I was able to kind of turn to that. But I definitely know, and my friends and family tell me that this has really helped me. I don't want to say grow, but to kind of function better. That I have this going on. So I really, if there's something you're interested in, don't set it aside. Keep it with you. Find time for it, and trying to develop it, and be creative will help you across all of your, life issues.
All right, Nikki, you want to go next?
Sure. I would say don't let academia rule every aspect of your life. There are always ways to still be able to do what you want to do. I know that a lot of times academia can restrict where we might live, for instance, because of where job opportunities are. There might be a pressure to do certain things in a certain order, but it's okay to go rogue sometimes. I recently have been going rogue in terms of pursuing projects that typically people might encourage you to do after you receive tenure. So for example, my first book was recently published, and it is a primary source collection of work by and about a woman named Mary Ann Shadd Cary. And she was an abolitionist, a suffragist, and the first Black woman newspaper editor in North America. this is the 200-year anniversary of her birth, so it was really important for me to have this book come out this year. But for those of you who might be in the humanities, you may know that that is not the correct order that you're supposed to do things in. You're not supposed to publish that kind of book. Your first book is supposed to be your single authored monograph where you write everything from cover to cover as a traditional book. I did not do that first because this was more important to me personally and politically, to be able to shine a light on the important work that Mary Ann Shadd Cary was doing during the 200-year commemorations that are taking place. So it's okay to go rogue sometimes.
I love that, the idea of going rogue, and that ties perfectly into what I have to say about this topic is that people are going to question your commitment to your scholarship if you have outside interests or what they perceive to be an outside interest. But just like Chris was saying, like this, being your full self, having your passion, being creative, that's going to serve you in your whole life, including your scholarship. As well as, just being able to prioritize the work that you think is important, like Nika is doing. And I'll just say that I definitely have had people say to my face and say behind my back that they question my, scientific capability or career because I do art. And for as many people there are that think that and would say that, there's been thousands more that think it makes me a better scientist, that find it inspiring, that felt like what I've done has created space for them to do their own thing. And even more fundamentally, I just wouldn't be happy with life if I couldn't do all these things. So I just echo every sentiment and just doing what you want to do, and don't worry about what other people say, especially the negative things, because you would be surprised by just the fact of you existing, doing what it is that you want to do parallel or separate from your scholarship is going to make a huge impact.
Okay, amazing. Thank you all. So we're going to turn it into the Q&A. Please feel free to keep submitting questions if you have more, but our top voted question on Huva comes from Maria Mora. Pretty simple, but I think it's very relevant. What is your best time management strategy? I can imagine that when you're dealing with a passion project, you got to make time for it, but you can't make too much time for it. So how do you balance when you're doing which? Christine, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. My very number one top time management skill is actually to sleep as much as you need every night. Yeah, I think, it seems like a sacrifice. Oh, I don't have this much time to sleep 8 hours a night, 9 hours. And for me, sometimes it's 10 hours, but you function way better the next day. And then my second one is compartmentalization. I actually, for a while, chose not to, well, partially also because I was broke, kind of like Nika mentioned, like in grad school, I chose not to pay for Wi-Fi at home. Both economic reasons, but also to force me to get my academic work done in the lab on campus where there's Wi-Fi everywhere. So when I got home, it was just draw, cook, eat, sleep. And that forced me to develop a habit to motivate myself. I don't bring my academic work home. Unless there's a rare exception of like once every few months, I might have to prepare a lab meeting the next day. But for me, it really helps to draw pretty hard boundaries around that. And that means also protected time for the art, protected time for exercise or sleep or whatever it might be. Work can't leak into that, but sometimes the passion projects, side hustles can't leak into the time you set aside for your scholarship as well.
Yeah, I really just want to echo the importance of sleep. I've been screaming about this the entire time I've been in the academy. You can't drive the car if there's no fuel in the tank. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Nika, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I just want to co-sign the sleep thing. If the choice is between getting enough sleep and not getting something done, I'm going to choose sleep 9.5 times out of 10. That is one of my non-negotiables, unless I'm in an extremely dire situation with a deadline. But in terms of time management, I try to keep my work to a 9 to 5 wherever possible. That isn't always the case when I'm finding time to do things that are not from my day job, but at least day job things I try to keep in 9 to 5, so I've got other time, whether it's in the evening or on the weekends, to do things like work on the organization that I co-founded, the Black Women's Studies Association. I also try to have specific days for specific things. And I work alongside other people in a writing group, which offers some accountability. So for example, on Mondays and Fridays, from 8 a.m. onwards, which is honestly too early for me, but I'm working on it. We have a writing group where we meet probably for at least 2 to 3 hours, and we focus on research. That's not time to grade or do other things. That time is for research. On Wednesdays, I try to do teaching things, whether that means preparing for class or grading. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm teaching those days. I know I'm not going to get anything else done. So identifying which days are for which tasks and making sure I'm carving out time for accountability and protecting my research time, even though I have other things going on, has been really helpful for time management.
All right, and Chris, want to bring it home?
Sure. I would just add that those are all great suggestions, and I wish I had that advice when I was younger. I struggled with time management. I usually didn't sleep enough or eat well enough. But as far as like the way I work it now it's very similar. Every day is its own day. I make sure that I have days that are off, days that I can do things that aren't teaching or research or working in my own lab. But the other part is that I insist that I have the time to play music now. It's part of my required weekly routine, whether this is just something on my own or a chance to play with the guys I'm playing music with, or just recently, we've been recording. And fortunately, we're all able to kind of work during normal business hours. Because they have night jobs as professional musicians. So we record starting at 9 in the morning, just when everyone thinks rock music is at its best. But we do it, and just making that time and then just sticking to it.
Wonderful. This next question, in some ways, y'all might have answered it, but it does blend perfectly. It's from Farnaz Yousefi. I'm sorry, no, this is from Kian Nicholson. How do you set time aside for a passion project when you know it will only benefit you in the short term? So I guess how do you grapple with I'm doing this thing that's going to have a payoff now, and therefore I'm not doing something for my academic research that has the long-term career implications? You want to start, Nika?
Yeah, I want to push back gently on this framing of only benefiting you in the short term. Suggest perhaps reframe how you approach the idea of short-term fulfillment. Just because it's short-term doesn't mean that it's any less significant than things that might otherwise be long-term, because repeated short-term things ultimately become habits that are long-term. So I just want to start off by suggesting perhaps reframe the approach to how you're assigning value to short-term versus long-term. But that being said, I do normally try to carve out time on weekends for some of those things. I'm also a really big soccer fan. And so every Saturday and Sunday, that's on the TV from probably 9 o'clock in the morning until noon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's okay to have habits or hobbies and things that you make sure that you create time for that are not academic or otherwise professional things. The same practices apply, I think, with me saying, okay, Mondays and Fridays are for research, Tuesdays through Thursdays are for teaching, Saturdays are for soccer games.
I love that. Chris, you want to go next?
No, I wouldn't devalue short-term, schedule, short-term kind of satisfaction, because it is cumulative. And a lot of it is just finding that thing that you're doing that is, maybe it's a short term, like writing a song or doing something that's a smaller project, but maybe it's part of a longer term development. And we're allowed to do more than one thing and like more than one thing. Academics is consuming, just like a lot of professional careers are. I feel that we are more fortunate than many of our peers, say in law firms, where there is literally no time to work. No time to do anything. That we have a lot of control over our schedule, depending on if that's the case for you. But I feel like that's a lot of the joy of academics, is that we can function a little bit more autonomously. You just have to find the way to make that happen.
And I'll just add something that a professor of mine 10 years ago told me, that even wrote into one of my grad school application essays, is like everything you do is going to come back and help you later on in your life. Just like how Nika's example of making this meme led to this Slate article, you never know when you're doing something really true and really real and maybe feel short term or you know, just in that moment, you never know when it's going to serve you or create some opportunity. So there really, yeah, doesn't need to be this trade-off of short-term benefit, long-term benefit. I think you just need to be really authentic to yourself and recognize that you deserve to do things that you enjoy. You should put it in your calendar. A lot of times I, you know, book out on Google Calendar all the experiments I'm going to do. I notice I have like a 3-week recipe for burnout. Then very next Monday, I block out that day, go on a long walk with my dog. That's on my calendar for a 3-hour time chunk, something like that. Or, you know, I just put it in my calendar. I make time for it. And that's going to make you do it. And it's going to make you be motivated to finish your other work around that time to make sure that you stick to it. So I think it's just about recognizing that you deserve to do whatever it is that you want to do. There's no value judgment here that you need to make preemptively before you decide to rule something out of your life.
No quibbling about it. The calendar said I had to walk my dog. What am I supposed to do? It's on the calendar. Okay, that I loved those answers. Thank you so much. And I'd actually like to continue down this thread a little bit and ask you each, when was a time when when something you did as a passion project that wasn't necessarily a long-term thing, it was something you did, or even something you're doing continuously, but that's outside of your research, came around full circle and influenced the way you conducted your like academic research writ proper? Does anyone want to volunteer to go first on this?
I can go.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, I was doing a postdoc at Davidson College, where they had a lot of internal funding to be able to do things with courses or research involving students in some way, shape, or form. And this was only a 2-year postdoc, so I didn't envision anything long-term based on my work there, besides maybe the classes I was teaching and being able to take those elsewhere. And one of my colleagues in my department taught a course on Cuban history where she would travel with students to Cuba. And I thought to myself, haha, wouldn't it be funny if I could scam this school into paying for me to go to the Caribbean? And I did, in fact, end up having a legitimate reason to develop a trip for my students to go to Barbados, because I was teaching a class called Women in Slavery in the Black Atlantic. And not to go dive into too much history, but long story short, Barbados was Britain's first and most profitable slave society. And there's a lot of history in Barbados that was actually very relevant to the class that I was teaching. And even though I was only going to be in that postdoc for 2 years, I did decide to develop a spring break trip that would go to Barbados. And I was actually able to do that same trip again and expand it, revision it somewhat for a different class that I've taught in my current position at Washington and Lee University. And I remember as well when I was applying for jobs that this trip that I only saw as something short term was actually really attractive to the search committees that I was speaking to. So it started off with me really just wanting someone else to pay for me to travel. And it turned into something that was actually really valuable, not just for me, but also for students, and something that I could do elsewhere.
I can mention just briefly, it's a really, it's a tough question. I wish it was an easier answer, but I would think that the best story I can share is that indeed, similarly, when I was looking for jobs and having this musical background, people I think saw that as somehow well-rounded and not just the one like driven academic. And so I think to the degree that you can sort of pitch that as not interfering with your capacity to do an excellent job at this institution, but something that's, you know, part of who you are and something you would bring no matter what your job ends up being, because it gives you that kind of personality that I think that our colleagues tend to look for, you know.
For me, it's almost hard to separate, you know, I feel like so much of my career success in science actually had to do a lot with my passion projects in art and science communication. A lot of the volunteer work I do for community groups in the sciences has to do with me making art for them, doing communications with them. In fact, I'm currently right now actually Zooming in from Washington, D.C. Convention Center because I'm here for the Society for Neuroscience conference where I have an art booth every single year. And the very first time I went, I was, I believe, a third year in graduate school, did not have enough data to present a poster, but I saw that there was an art exhibit area. I submitted for that, got it, and people know my name now because they keep seeing me at the booth every year. And every time I write a grant application about, my broader impact, my service, my leadership, a lot of it comes back to the art, to the community service. And through that, I also made a name for myself. I'm also now like a trainee advisory committee member, part of the society. And it's very much because of the fact that like I am, this person that does so many things and has all these perspectives and is very open about sharing ideas and opinions, many of them controversial, and which I think just needs to be shared. So I think just in the thread of being yourself and being authentic and doing your passion projects and speaking your mind and, prioritizing the projects that you think are really important that need to be out there right now for people to see in this like current like social context. I think it pays dividends on and on and on and on in your scholarship as well.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that assessment. As we forget this as academics. It's actually when you're well-rounded, you do better than if you specialize too much. And we're forced to specialize. That's the nature of the game, but we can't, do it to the detriment of letting everything else atrophy. So I would just like to put a final bow on this in what I think has been the moral of the story from all three of you. And you can feel free to correct you if I'm wrong, but I think the moral of the story is that we are people first and academics second. And many times the academy tries and tells us that we are supposed to be academics first, academics second, academics third, and then maybe have some tertiary identity that doesn't really matter. And it's fine to be proud of being an academic. And of course, it's a huge part of your identity, but you can't let it become so all consuming that you forget to enjoy other things in life. So Nika, Chris, Christine, and to our audience, please join me in thanking these amazing panelists for sharing a wealth of insight with us. I know I'm going to be putting a lot of these into actions, and I hope you all will too. So thank you so, so much. Everyone, we have a great set of panels coming up at 2:25. We have My Unconventional Odyssey, exploring non-traditional career paths for PhDs. Perfect sort of segue. And then From Outsider to Insider, finding my authentic voice in an unfamiliar space. So I hope y'all will stick around and enjoy the next set of panels. And to our panelists, thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Gregory.
Thank you.